Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the overview for the condominium manager licensing. We're expecting in excess of, well in excess of 200 people to be on this webinar, and we're at about 120 have joined thus far. But we had said we would start at 1, so I'm going to get started. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Doug Dixon, one of RECA's regulatory compliance advisors. My role is to assist brokers and managers with any regulatory or practice issues. I have been in the real estate industry going on 40 years now. My condo experience includes selling condos and working with builders and developers in the 80s and 90s. I have been in the regulatory positions for about 25 years and have dealt with many condo issues over that time. For the last 3 years, I've been providing support to the Condominium Manager Implementation Advisory Committee. I've also owned and lived in a bare land condo for the last 10 years and have been on its board for the last 8 years. So that's a little bit about me, and for our session today, I'm going to be covering these broad topics, and in order to keep the presentation moving along, and to respect your time, I would ask that you save questions for the end of the presentation. I'm going to go through the presentation, so while I'm going through it, if a question comes to mind, please enter your question into the Q&A tab of the Zoom function, not into chat, but into the Q&A. Excuse me. And once I have finished the formal presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions on the topics I have covered and anything else related to the regulation and licensing of condominium management. As many of the people applying for a condominium management license are not familiar with the MyRECA online licensing system, I ask for the patience of those who are already experienced with the system. There's a lot of information to cover, so let's get started. The new governance that came into effect December 1st of 2020 has 11 public and 12 industry members. One of the requirements is that the board chair must be one of the public members. Each sector regulated by RECA has an industry council. As you can see, condominium management comes under the Residential Property Management Industry Council, shown at the far right on this slide. The council will be responsible for all types of condominium management, so residential, commercial, industrial, and any other miscellaneous types there may be. The definition of condominium management is being added to the Real Estate Act. So you can see here, it's quite broad. Condominium management services means the exercising of power or performing a duty, but it's not, it includes, but doesn't limit itself to these specific things. So there'll be lots of issues that come out of these different areas that are highlighted that also would be considered condominium management. So collecting, holding, or dispersing funds, enforcing the bylaws or rules of the corporation, negotiating and entering into contracts on behalf of the corporation, and supervising employees or contractors hired by the corporation. So it's quite a broad definition, and will capture a large number of services that get provided to condominium corporations by condominium managers. Here is a high-level timeline of how things are going to proceed. So as you know, we opened eligibility process on August the 3rd, and that's the preliminary steps that people who want to apply for a license need to go through in order to ensure what license they are will be approved for. So whether you'd be an associate or whether you'd be associate broker or broker, you need to go through that eligibility process to ensure that you qualify so that when the licensing opens on October the 12th, you'll know where you stand. So, we've held off opening licensing until October the 12th so that we would be clear of the annual renewals for the other two industries that RECA regulates, real estate and mortgage brokerage. So once we're clear of the renewals and tidying things up after renewals are closed, then we will open for condominium management. So that will give a little over 6 weeks for all condominium management companies to get their applications for licensing in place, and then the individuals as well. As of December 1st of this year, RECA will start regulating and officially enforcing the regulations for the condominium management industry. So prior to that, we won't have any authority over the condominium management industry. But once December 1st comes, the act and the rules that apply to the condominium management industry will come into full effect. As of December 1st, conditional licenses will be granted, and those conditional licenses will run for 12 months, and it will be up to the licensees to remove the conditions from their license prior to the end of November of 2022. So it's very important that you take the steps to meet any requirements that are a condition on your license and get that resolved before the end of the 12-month period. And I'll get into more detail on that in a little bit later. So this slide shows the 3 different levels of licenses that will be issued for condominium management. So the company level is called a brokerage in the regulatory structure. So we have some brokerages that are already doing condominium management. We also have a lot of companies that are not currently licensed that will get licensed and will become condominium management brokerages. Just for clarification, it's important for everyone to understand that condominium management is being regulated as a completely separate industry from real estate. So the only activity that can take place through a condominium management brokerage is condominium management services. So if a brokerage is currently up and running and does multiple services, such as property management or sales and leasing, and they do condominium management, they will have to open a second brokerage specifically for condominium management. The same company or corporation can own both brokerages, a real estate brokerage and a condominium management brokerage. The operations can be out of the same office space. They can share some of the same staff, administration, bookkeeping, etc. But condominium management is a separate industry and has to be set up as a separate brokerage. Next is the broker or associate broker, and brokers and associate brokers have the same qualifications under our licensing system and are interchangeable, but there can only be one broker at a brokerage, and the broker is responsible for the activities of that brokerage to RECA. So there can be associate brokers that hold the same qualification and may be working strictly as condominium managers, or in some situations, particularly larger brokerages, an associate broker may be assigned some of the duties on behalf of the broker to assist in managing a larger corporation with larger number of portfolios. So it's up to management within a brokerage to decide what their structure is going to be, but there can be both brokers and associate brokers licensed with a brokerage. And then the last one on the right here is associate, and associate are the frontline condominium managers that go out and meet with the boards of directors of the condominium corporations. And although the license is called a condominium manager associate, RECA does not have any issue with individuals in the condominium management area using other terminology to describe themselves. So if your preference is to continue to be called a condo manager or condominium manager, that's fine. You can do that. You can have that on your business cards, letterhead, emails, as long as whatever you're calling yourself in carrying out your business, condominium management, does not mislead the public or boards as to what your status is, your position is. So you can use other terminology other than strictly using associate. In order to move an unregulated industry into a regulated structure, RECA will issue conditional licenses to approved applicants, subject to them taking the appropriate steps to remove the conditions, as I mentioned, by December 1st. So the steps actually you have to have it completed by November 30th, actually. And licensees issued a conditional license will be encouraged to challenge the appropriate exam or exams as soon as possible after being issued a license. This will allow time to complete any course or courses if necessary and retake the exam or exams well in advance the December 1st, 22 deadline. So our recommendation would be as early as possible in January, February. If you're going to challenge an exam rather than take the course, then we recommend you do it early in that January, February timeframe so that you know where you stand. Because if you are not successful in challenging the exam, then you will have to register and complete the course or courses, whatever is appropriate for your particular situation, and then rewrite the exam. And the last thing you will want to be doing in the fall of 2022 is going through this process and being in a panic to get it done prior to the condition and your license getting suspended as of December 1st, 2022. So any licensees, as I say, that fail to do this will have their license suspended until they meet the requirements. While suspended, they would not be able to provide condominium management services until the conditions are removed and they reinstate their license. From the discussions I've had with many brokers and owners of companies doing condominium management, it is clear many plan for their condominium managers to complete the appropriate courses prior to challenging the exam or exams. This is because they believe their condo managers will be more professional, knowledgeable, and it will lessen liability for their brokerage by taking that step. So shown here are 3 different situations that currently exist for brokerages or unlicensed companies in the condominium management industry. So on the furthest left, we have a brokerage in the blue that only does condominium management. So this company is licensed as a brokerage with RECA and only does condominium management. And we believe that most of the companies that are in this situation will transition their license from a condominium or from a real estate license over to a condominium management license. So, so if they've re-registered their licenses as of the end of September, and they have a real estate license effective October 1st for the next licensing cycle, then they're in a position where they can simply transition their license for their brokerage and their individuals from being a real estate license over to being a condominium management license in that 6 or 7 weeks leading up to December 1st. In the middle, in the green square, we have a brokerage that's currently licensed with RECA, but it provides multiple services currently. So in addition to condominium management, so it may be a property management company, it may do sales and leasing. And in order for it to move forward, it will have to open a second brokerage, as I mentioned earlier, and that brokerage will be specifically for condominium management. All the other activities the brokerage does, that company does that now has 2 brokerages, so property management, sales, leasing, would all continue through their existing real estate brokerage, but their condominium management activities will all have to be done through their new condominium management brokerage. Then you have companies that are not currently licensed at all with RECA, as they have not been required to be licensed previously. So in order for these companies to continue to practice and provide condominium management services, they will be required to get licensed by December 1st of this year. So if they're only doing condominium management, then they will only have one brokerage specifically for condominium management. Now, paralleling that, we have a similar situation for brokers. So these are people that are currently licensed as brokers with the Real Estate Council. And so in the blue square, if a broker only does condominium management and their brokerage is only doing condominium management, as I said, they will likely transition over to being a condominium management brokerage. And that's fairly straightforward. It's just a matter of them going through the administrative portion of that with RECA to transfer over. And it should be fairly seamless. And then there's brokers that are a broker for a current brokerage that provides a number of services in real estate and condominium management. If the broker is involved with 2 or more years with the management of condominium management services, then that broker will likely be qualified to also be the broker for the new condominium management brokerage that they would be opening. So you could have a situation where a broker is the broker for a real estate brokerage and is also the broker for the condominium management brokerage. And that's possible because they're two different industries. You can't be licensed with more than one brokerage within an industry, but you can be licensed in multiple industries. So this applies, as I said, to a broker who is actively involved with condominium management. The orange, or the furthest on the right, is a situation where the brokerage provides multiple services in real estate and condominium management, but the broker is not involved on the condominium management side. So we know there's situations where the brokerage does condominium management, but the broker is not experienced in that area and has never been a condominium manager, but they have typically somebody on their staff who oversees the condominium management side of their business. So in that instance, that broker would not be qualified to also be the broker for a condominium management brokerage. They could continue to be the broker for their current brokerage, but they would have to hire a broker that's qualified to be the broker for their new condominium management brokerage. And then associates, or frontline condominium managers. So you have, again, you'll have people that are in different situations. So in the blue square, we're talking about a person who only does condominium management. So they're currently licensed with RECA, and the only thing they do with the brokerage is condominium management. So in that case, again, our expectation is they will probably just simply transfer their license over from being a real estate license to being an associate under the condominium management licensing. So again, that's fairly straightforward. But in the case of a person who's licensed working for a current brokerage and they trade in real estate, so they're doing either property management or sales or leasing, if that's the case, and they're doing condominium management, that person can be licensed by as an associate with both brokerages. So they would continue to be licensed under the real estate brokerage for their trading activities in real estate, but they would have a new license as an associate for the condominium management brokerage that their company sets up. So again, that can happen because a person can hold a license in two separate industries. Excuse me. I'm now going to go through the same situations that I've just described, but through the eligibility process for getting licensed in the different situations. So these next 4 slides summarize the licensing process for people who currently provide condominium management services, but are in different situations. This first slide shows the process a condo manager who is currently licensed as an associate with RECA will follow to eventually end up with an unconditional condominium manager associate license. So initially, they would go through the eligibility process, and I'm going to go through an explanation of the eligibility process and the MyRECA online system for doing that a little later on. But initially, I'm going to show you the high-level process. So this person who's currently licensed as an associate with RECA would have to go through the eligibility. And because they're currently licensed with RECA, we already have much of the information for them. We have their criminal record check status and other statuses that's required to be licensed. But because there were some issues prior to January of 2014, if you were licensed prior to that date, you may be asked for specific identification documents because there were some things not done completely right initially, or we have some missing information that we just want to clear up as we're moving forward. So, but from an eligibility perspective, a currently licensed associate is fairly straightforward from an eligibility perspective. They would have to provide an affirmation of their condominium manager experience. So there's a form specifically for that I'll come to in a little bit. and they would upload that form into the online system. And so it asks for their experience, and in order to get a conditional license, there's a requirement that they have a minimum of 2 years frontline condominium management experience. And then it also asks for some details around which corporations they've been involved with managing sometime in the last typically 5 years. Next step in this process would be the licensing that opens from October 12th forward. And so if they've been approved from an eligibility perspective, then they will be eligible to get licensed in that 6 or 7 weeks leading up to December 1st. But their license will be conditional on them passing a successful exam challenge and completing the necessary course if they don't pass the exam. So you can see as the flow chart goes down to the exam challenge. So they do the exam challenge. If they're successful, then the condition is removed from their license. And if they're not successful, they would have to do the course. Because they're currently licensed with RECA and they've done the fundamentals of real estate course in the past, they get credit for that course moving forward as a condominium manager. So they would not be required to do the fundamentals of condominium management course. They would get credit for the current fundamentals course they have. And the reason for that is there's not a significant difference between the two fundamentals courses because of the nature of the material they cover, agency, contract law, etc. So you can see they only have an associate who's currently licensed with RECA only has to do the one exam challenge or one course if they should not be successful in doing passing the exam. And you also have the choice of doing the course first and then challenging the exam. And that's up to you and your brokerage. This next situation is a condominium manager who's not currently licensed with RECA. So somebody, again, a frontline condominium manager who's not involved with the management of the company, but works as a condo manager working with condominium corporations. The biggest difference in this section is the eligibility process. Because you're not licensed with RECA, there's more information that you will have to provide through the eligibility process. So your proof of ability to work in Canada, government ID, photo ID, you will have to do a certified criminal record check. And I'll come to I have another slide that gets into details about that. But just make a note that if you aren't licensed with RECA, or you haven't been licensed in over a year, you need to get a criminal record check done. And that can take a couple of months for that process to take place. So you need to start that process as soon as possible so that you have your CCRC in place and turned over to RECA prior to licensing effective December 1st. You also have to be of good character, and I'll touch on that a little later. And then anybody who's had a license previously and they've permanently withdrawn from the industry, they are not eligible for licensing as a condo manager. So, and for those again that aren't familiar with this, Section 54 is a situation where somebody, there has been a complaint or accusations made against them. The investigation process may have started, and that person has decided rather than go through the investigation process and possibly hearing process and onward and face possible sanctions, they've decided simply to withdraw from the industry and agree that they will never apply for a license through the real estate council again in the future. So those people will not be able to apply for a license under condo management. So again, there's the same affirmation for experience. The license application process will be the same with the same types of conditions put on the license. But because the people in this category have never been licensed with RECA, they would not have done any of the RECA licensing courses. So in this case, they would have to challenge two different exams, the fundamentals of condominium managers practices the fundamental of condominium managers and condominium manager practices. So there's two different exams and two different courses. So if the person should fail either of the exams, they would have to complete the associated course and get through the exam the second time before that condition would get removed from their license. And again, same thing, they could do the courses first if they choose, and then do the exams. Now, we're going to talk about brokers and associate brokers. And as I said, they have the same qualifications and are interchangeable. So a broker can step down from being a broker and become an associate broker, or an associate broker can step up to the position of broker. Again, there's very little from an eligibility point of view for documentation that they have to provide. If they were licensed prior to January of 2014, there may be requirements for some identification documents. But from an experience point of view, they would have to do the same thing, complete an affirmation. They would have to have a minimum of 2 years experience as a frontline condominium manager. And they would also have to have 2 or more years experience managing a company that provides condominium management services. So they're typically, you're probably going to see experience levels of 4 or more years in total, but it is possible for somebody to have 2 or 3 years experience total in condominium management and still meet this requirement, because you could have a situation, for instance, where somebody worked as a condominium manager for 1 year for a current company doing condominium management, and then they decided to strike out on their own and start their own brokerage, and they may have opened up their own brokerage and have had it for more than a year. So they would have, or for 2 years, sorry, and then they would have their 3 years experience as a condo manager and 2 years experience as a broker in that situation. But at a minimum, you could actually have somebody that gets into condominium management from scratch and does both condominium management and runs their own condominium management company. So it could be as little as 2 years total experience. So it depends on each individual. So as these affirmations come in, RECA staff review them to ensure that they meet the necessary requirements. If there's a gap or something doesn't quite fit, either licensing staff or myself will contact you to discuss your situation to make sure that your eligibility and experience meet the requirements. And then this goes on to the same process that your licensing would open as of October the 12th. Same thing, because these brokers and associate brokers are currently licensed with RECA. They will only have one condition on their license for a condominium manager license, and that is that they have to do the challenge for the condominium manager practices exam. And if they're not successful, they would have to do the course and redo the exam. The reason they only have to do the one is because they get credit for the fundamentals course that they've already done in order to get licensed as they are currently. And they've also done the broker course and have experience as a broker. So they're given credit for that as well. So they just have to do the challenge for the condominium manager practices exam. And as I said, do the course if necessary. The next slide is the same situation as this, except it's for people who are not currently licensed with RECA, but work at the broker or associate broker level. So this is people who have been frontline condo managers for 2 or more years, and they've been involved with the management of a condominium management company for 2 or more years. So they would have to go through the eligibility process and provide the information shown here, the proof of ability to work in Canada, identification, criminal record check. They have to meet the good character requirements. And again, the same thing applies around the Section 54. So the managers will have to fill out the affirmation, or the brokers and associate brokers. Again, they have to fill out the section for their two or more years experience of frontline condominium management experience, and also fill out the section that describes what companies they have been working at if they've been in a management position. And then the rest of the flow goes through the same with the licensing after October the 12th. But in this case, because the people that fit in this category have never been licensed with RECA and have not done any of the licensing courses, they don't receive any credits as the ones on the previous slide. So a broker or associate broker in this case would have 3 courses or 3 exams. So they could challenge the 3 separate exams: the fundamentals, the condominium manager practices, and the condominium manager broker exams. If they're successful at passing all of those, then they would have the conditions removed from their license, and on they would go. But if they're unsuccessful in any of the 3 exams, then they would have to do the course affiliated with that particular exam, and then rewrite the exam again. Excuse me. So that's how we're getting people to being licensed as of December 1st, as far as the flow is concerned. But I'm going to go through the different components and then go on to the online explanations. So as I mentioned earlier in some of the earlier slides, good character is a requirement for license eligibility. And on this slide, you'll see that there's the essentials of good character, but there are 2 times sort of that we as a regulator look at good character. And that would be when somebody's getting their initial licensing and also on renewals. And then the other time would be if there's a complaint or an investigation of some kind taking place, then good character could come into play there as well. So this is all to protect the industry and to protect the consumer. And I'm not going to go through the details on this, but because it's pretty straightforward. But what is good character at the end of the day? It's respect for the rule of law, honesty, governability, financial responsibility, and professionalism. So respect for the rule of law. Well, what some of the things we would look at there, if there's ever been a criminal conviction, for instance, of somebody applying. Honesty, if there's ever been anything in their past that has come up that would question their honesty. Governability is, does the person meet the requirements to follow the rules? So we are a regulated industry with legislation, with regulations, and with rules. And people who work within this industry are expected to follow them. And if they don't, then there's consequences. So an example would be of somebody who's not governable. We had an instance in the past where somebody, it was an advertising issue, and they chose not to follow the rules around advertising. And so they would get fined for it. And they got fined numerous times, and they felt that the cost of doing business, fining was just part of that cost of doing business. So they continued to ignore the requirements for advertising. Well, it came to a head eventually, and that person ended up being suspended, their license being suspended, and hearing costs and fines in the amount of almost $100,000. So if you're in a regulated industry, governability is very important. Financial responsibility, and what comes under that typically would be instances where somebody might have had a bankruptcy proceeding. And just so that you know, bankruptcy is not just somebody who's gone through a formal bankruptcy procedure. It also includes somebody that's gone through a settlement of debts process as well, because that also falls under the Bankruptcy Act. So if you've done anything under the Bankruptcy Act, then that has to be reported on initial licensing. It has to be reported on renewals if it's happened in the previous year while you've been licensed. But for people applying as part of this process to get licensed as a condominium manager, if you have gone through a personal bankruptcy and you have been discharged from that personal bankruptcy, you'll see that there's a place when you are going through the licensing process to disclose that. But there's also a place where you can decide if you want to have a review to see whether or not you're eligible for licensing because of this bankruptcy situation. Our recommendation is that you do not apply for a special review just simply because you've had a personal bankruptcy. That would not normally be a bar to getting a license. So if it might be an issue for a broker if they've had business bankruptcies in the past, or if an individual has had multiple bankruptcies, it could be an issue. But somebody who simply had one personal bankruptcy proceeding, you don't need to get a special review done on that issue. MyRECA has a department called Trust Assurance and Practice Review, and that is a program that's put in place to help brokers and practitioners understand the requirements and to ensure that they're actually following through. And it focuses mostly on the broker's activities and the administrative side of a brokerage, and includes oversight of the trust accounts that a brokerage holds. So our focus on trust assurance and practice review is as education. We really do this to try to help educate the brokers and senior administrators with firms, so that they're better equipped to carry out their job, so they're better equipped to meet the requirements under the Act and the rules. It's not designed as a punitive system. It's really an educational process. Not to say that it won't be punitive, because if during this process there were things discovered such as serious irregularities with trust accounts, or fraud, if anything like that was to come up, then it would move to a different level and go under a review with our professional conduct review. MyRECA has a complaint process in condominium management. That complaint process will be if there's a complaint against a condominium manager or brokerage, is what would be investigated. Typically, our expectation is if there are complaints, they would come from boards that employ a condominium manager at their brokerage. But even though that's the prime employer of the condominium manager to carry out services, we would in fact take complaints from other sources such as unit owners or the general public, depending on what the issue is. If it was a unit owner, though, and they were to contact MyRECA about a complaint or a problem, we would talk to them about it. And if it's something that we felt that should be resolved or was possible to be resolved between their board and the unit owner, or between the board and the condo manager without it going through a formal complaint process, that would be the way we would try to have it go. But if it was a more serious issue, then in fact, of course, we would investigate it regardless of the source. Oh, and the last point here is that MyRECA is responsible for unlicensed activity as well. So if it comes to our attention that there are individuals or companies providing condominium management services to condominium corporations, and that, like I say, that's brought to our attention, then we would investigate. If it's found that they are doing that, the very first thing that happens is we tell them to stop doing it, and they have the option of just stopping and not doing it anymore, or stopping it, getting qualified, and resuming it after they're qualified and licensed. But if they don't stop doing it, or in other certain serious cases, it may go straight through to the conduct review and could end up going through a hearing process at the end of the day. And the financial consequences could be quite serious, because it could be up to $25,000 per breach of the rules. And if they breach several rules, then it could be quite a large sum, plus the cost of hearing if that was the case. So, so we take unlicensed practice very seriously, and we would hope that anybody that works in the industry and is aware of instances where somebody could be practicing without a license, for them to let us know, bring it to our attention so that we can look into it. This slide is just the rule for errors and omissions insurance. The broad requirement here is that every brokerage doing condominium management must carry specific coverage, as shown here, $1 million coverage. And condominium management is not being covered under the REX program, as same as the real estate industry. And some of you, particularly those that are licensed, would be familiar with REX, the real estate insurance exchange, that was set up to provide a affordable errors and omissions program for the real estate industry, but it was not designed for the situation that condominium management brings in, where there's quite large sums of money being held in trust and managed by condominium management companies compared to what happens in real estate. So because of that, that's why it was decided that the condominium management industry, the brokerages, would have to carry a policy. So it's important that they carry that policy, and as long as they have authorization, or as long as they're licensed, they have to maintain this errors and omissions policy. If at any time the policy is terminated or canceled, they have to immediately notify the registrar. And if you don't have insurance, you're not in a position to continue carrying on business. So it's a really important item. The second insurance piece is the fraudulent or dishonest acts insurance requirements. And this was something that came into play as a result of the revisions that the provincial government made at the last stages of bringing the changes to the regulations under the Condominium Property Act into play. So this changed RECA's approach. Initially, RECA was going to have a rule that would require every condominium management brokerage to carry this coverage. But once the government put it in the regulations for every condominium management, every condominium corporation, it's mandatory as a corporation, they have to carry this coverage. And the coverage must cover their board of directors, any employees of the corporation, and any third-party management brokerages the company hires, the corporation hires. So that would include the condominium management company. So prior to a condominium management brokerage providing services to a condominium corporation, you must ensure that that condominium corporation is carrying the insurance required under the CPA, the Insurance Against Fraudulent or Dishonest Acts, and that there's a current policy in place. And then you must ensure that that policy remains in place in effect as long as you're managing that particular corporation. If at any time the policy is canceled or terminated, then again, the brokerage is in a position that they cannot continue to provide services until that issue has been resolved. So now I'm going to quickly go through the process of setting up a MyRECA account. This is very important for any applicants that have never had a MyRECA account. So it's a simple process. I will just note that there are some small differences between these tutorial slides, as some of the terminology has changed. So as you can see on this slide, it uses the term industry professionals, and that has changed to licensees. So the tutorials that are on the RECA website that are similar to these ones, and some of the information that's within the MyRECA system, there may be some terminology that has not been changed over with the recent changes to the Act and the rules, but they're not significant, and they don't change your use of the system. So first you have to create an account. Once you've created an account and sign in, then you've signed in, and now the very first thing you have to do is indicate what type of user you are. So you'll see on this, there's a drop down, and there's 3 choices, and you are an industry professional or a licensee. We also use this system, allow access to the system by brokerage administrators and accountants. But everybody who's licensed for the practice of condominium management would select the industry member / licensee category. And then when you do that, it will move you on to the next steps. So it's pretty straightforward. It'll ask you questions or ask you to provide certain information as you go through this process. Anywhere you see a little circle with a question mark beside it, you can click on that, and it will bring up additional information about that particular drop down or the information that's being requested. So it's very straightforward. So continuing going through it and answering the personal and contact information questions, just fill them out. Everything has to be completed. And if you are coming from another jurisdiction, there's a function called license mobility. under the labor mobility requirements in Canada. And currently, there are only 2 other provinces that actually have licensing for condominium management, and that's British Columbia and Ontario. So typically, what we could see is somebody moving from either of those provinces to Alberta and wanting to get a license here, or we could see somebody in either of those provinces wanting to be licensed in both provinces. So, so if they select this button that they're going through a license mobility application, that takes them down a different route. But for those of you that are applying over the next couple of months for licensing, you'll be saying no to this and saying just passing by this particular function. So this is asking about your suitability for licensing. So, and as it mentions here, criminal record, bankruptcy, disciplinary history, those sorts of things. So it's going to, if the answer is yes, that you've had any of these things happen, then you need to click on yes, and it takes you down a route of questioning. And then no, if you have none of those things, then it would take you directly to the eligibility for education. So this particular eligibility section applies to brand new licensees, not licensed in other industries with RECA. So if you've never been licensed before, then you need to go through this eligibility process. So you would complete, you would read what's here and then click on next, and it'll go through specific questions for you. So you want to get a license, so it'll be, you'd click condominium management in this particular case on the drop down. And then these are the specific questions. Are you legally able to work in Canada? Do you meet the education standards? Do you meet the English proficiency standards? And did you complete the introduction to career and real estate? That option will not show up for you in this particular case for condominium management. And if you click anything as a no, then of course there's going to be further questions about that. But for people applying through this process, we're not questioning people's English proficiency. We're not putting that requirement in place. For anybody licensing as a brand new person after December 1st with no experience in condominium management, they would have to prove English proficiency. But people who are currently working in the industry as a condo manager and have the experience, they would not be having to prove their English proficiency. So there's a few more questions, or the same questions, but here it's just showing you where you can click on the button or the symbol next to the question if you want more information. So you complete the rest of the application, and then you come to the payment portion. So anybody that's currently licensed with RECA and going through this through the eligibility process will not be charged the fee for processing eligibility. For brand new people who've never been licensed with RECA, there is a fee for going through the eligibility process that would have to be paid. Then after you pay the fee, you have to click complete. So when you hit complete here, it's important because it closes off this section. If you don't hit complete, the work you've done prior to that will not be saved. So hit complete, and then it takes you on into the further into the system. So this next several slides apply to persons currently licensed with RECA who will be applying for a condominium management license. As they are already recognized by RECA, it's a more streamlined process. So an existing licensee can apply to have their eligibility manager licensing reviewed. So you would be in your account for MyRECA. You would click on the left-hand side where it says My Applications, and then you would go down to the bottom where it says Condominium Manager Eligibility, and you would click on that. That will take you to the explanation of what will take place as part of the eligibility process, which is what I've been talking about. Then when you click on that for the next process, it will ask you, do you have 2 or more years experience out of the last 5 engaging in condominium management services? So that's acting as a frontline condo manager. And if you have 2 or more years experience, click yes. And then the next question is for somebody who has been acting as a manager. So this is a senior person in the company that is in a management role, supervising the activities of the brokerage. And if you have 2 or more years experience out of the last 5 doing that, then you would click yes. If you click no, then you would the process would go forward for an associate license. If you click yes, then the process would go forward, and the person, if they're approved, would be qualified to get either a broker or an associate broker's license. So once you get to that point, again, to submit your application, click complete. And this now takes you to your screen under My Applications. So you're still in your MyRECA account. You're at My Applications. And when you look at that, it'll show you that you have an application in process for condominium manager for the eligibility process. The office or the licensing section at RECA is waiting for further details. It's been assigned to you, the applicant. You would click complete, and then that will take you to the next section that will ask you to upload information into the system. So you're going to have to upload 2 different things. There's the condominium management affirmation, and then there's the government issued photo ID. So you would click on upload in both of those cases and upload the documents. There's another slide later on that shows the upload format, in that when you click upload, a screen will come up that will give you a choice of either selecting a file on your own computer that you're going to upload to RECA, or you can drag and drop a file on the screen that's in front of you on the MyRECA system. So a question that came up yesterday, somebody raised a concern about privacy issue and security of documents. RECA has a very robust IT system, servers, communication system, with many, many layers of protections in place to keep information confidential and safe. But just so you know, typically when you upload or provide information to RECA, such as your driver's license or a passport, we do not keep that document forever. Once you upload it, when the staff person responsible for reviewing your application opens up your application and looks at what you've uploaded, once they confirm that the information on your photo ID, for instance, matches with everything in your application process, then that document is deleted from our system. So RECA does not have thousands of copies of all kinds of driver's licenses and passports in our system. We use the information to verify what we have in our system, and then we remove it. So the eligibility for license falls in the 2 categories, as I mentioned: the broker and associate broker, and frontline condominium managers who are associates. And in order to go through this process, as I mentioned, you have to provide the affirmation, and the affirmation is located on the RECA website. It was in links and information that was sent out to you previously. And the affirmation is pretty straightforward. I've cut it up in a couple pieces to fit it on the screen here, but Section A is simply identifying who you are making the affirmation. Section B is larger than I show here, but it's your work history. So Section B, you would fill out condominium corporation information of corporations you've been involved in managing out of the last 5 years. It says list up to 5 of the most recent. So if you've had more than 5, you only have to list 5. If you've had less than 5 in the last 5 years, that's fine as well. If it's been 1, 2, or 3, doesn't really matter. Provide the information, and as long as it meets the requirement that you've been involved with management for more than 2 years, then that satisfies the requirement. Section C is applicable specifically to people who are managing companies. So managing condominium management companies, and they have experience as a condo manager as well as 2 or more years experience as a manager of a company. So you would provide the information on the company that you've been involved in managing and the number of years that you helped manage that company. And lastly is the declaration. So you will check off 2 portions on this. One, that you understand that the importance of this information, that it's true and accurate, and then you acknowledge that you have not provided any false information. Very important. There have been people denied licenses for lying in their licensing process right at the beginning, for providing misinformation. So it's very important that you provide accurate information when applying for a license. So once you've completed this document, you would scan it, and then you would be in a position to upload it into the MyRECA system. So as I said, there was a slide that showed you this, and so this is what comes up when you click on upload documents. So you can either select the file that's on your computer, or if it's on your desktop, for instance, you could just grab it off your desktop and slide it into the square and drop it, and it will get loaded and uploaded into the system. So again, once you've uploaded, you can see here on this slide, there's 2 different categories of document for upload. So in this case, it's saying that the affirmation has been uploaded, so it shows as submitted, but still waiting for the government ID to be uploaded. So your application would not go any further until you've completed both of these. So once your status is changed and things are submitted, everything's been submitted, then it would be under review, and you get an email once that process is finished saying that it's done. And then if you were to look, I think the next slide, no, it doesn't, but if you were to go back to your MyRECA after you get a notice that your review has, the outcome of your review, which in most cases will be approved, you could sign back into your MyRECA system and go to your applications, and it'll show as approved. Now, so what I've dealt with up till now has strictly been the eligibility process. Now I'm going to go through a few slides that will just show you the licensing application process. So as I said, licensing applications will not open until October the 12th. Individuals, condo manager associates or frontline condo managers will not be able to make application for a license until their broker and brokerage applications have been approved. So once the broker has submitted the application as their own approved, and they've submitted the application for the brokerage and that's approved, then all the people who are licensed with that brokerage will be able to apply, but they cannot apply until that process has happened. And then the applicants not currently licensed in another industry, or those who are licensed but have not been with a brokerage for over 1 year, must provide a current original CCRC, which is the Certified Criminal Record Check. And I'll come to a slide in a couple minutes specifically on that, but I remind you again how important it is, if you fall into this category, you've not had one done, if you're renewing a license and it's been over 1 year, or if you've never been licensed and you've not done a criminal record check, then you need to get that process started so that you're not late with us receiving the criminal record check. So if you're going to apply for a condominium management license, then you would sign into your MyRECA account, and under your tab, you would tab up here, and then you would be seeing their license status. So in your case, it's going to say condominium management. The license status, if you've gone through the eligibility process and you've been approved, it's going to indicate, it'll be lit up here, that you're eligible for licensing as an associate in condominium management licensing. So that's the first step of the process. the online system is a two-step process where the associate is responsible for certain parts and the broker is responsible for other portions in order to get the licensing complete. So the broker can't do anything further until the license status of the associate is showing eligible for licensing. So once you're there, then the associate can move this on to the next process. So the broker would be able to look up in the broker's account. So again, for those who are not familiar with MyRECA, you would, as an individual, as a broker, you would have your own MyRECA account. So the My Account, Education, and Licensing, those three tabs are for you as personally as a broker. And then the My Brokerage tab is for all the information about the licensing under your brokerage. So you would click on the My Brokerage tab, go to the My People tab, and then all the people that work are currently licensed with your brokerage and what they're licensed for. Sorry, I didn't mean to, I clicked on the wrong thing. Show up here, and their status, for instance, for continuing education courses also show if there happen to be a requirement for continuing education. So the broker, sorry, again, I clicked too early. The broker is going to add an associate by clicking here. And after they do that, it brings them to this screen. And so the broker would input the username for the associate that they're going to be bringing into the licensing system. So we use a username. So everybody that sets up a MyRECA account has a unique username. We do not have two usernames in the licensing system that are identical. Like, there cannot be, they have to be unique. The reason we do it this way is because, believe it or not, we can have two or more people with the same name. We can have two or more Jane Does or Jim Smiths in the system, whereas from a username, we will only have one. So when the broker puts in the person's username and does a search, then up will come the information on that particular associate. They would select them, and then they can see that it'll come up with their proper name and information at that point. So it's very important that the broker knows what your username is so that they can pull you into the licensing system. So the broker would select you. You'll find as a broker, there's explanations on every step along the way. You just follow the instructions. So once the broker has done their portion of this to select you into their account, then you would receive a message, the associate would, saying that there's a step for you to go through now to complete your licensing process. And the process is quite simple. So in your case, it's not going to say real estate, it's going to say condominium management, and it'll be a new license and registration. So you would click complete. And when you click complete, now again, remember, this is within the associates, you click complete, and then you have to go as an associate through the next couple of steps of the licensing process. So the next step is you have to confirm the personal and communication information or contact information that you have in your system. So you'd say, yes, that's correct. And you'd move on to the next piece. Then you'll get an explanation that you have to respond to certain questions. So again, you would go through these questions and click off yes or no. Remember, this information is what's going to go through to the broker. So once you've done that, you would then be asked to confirm the same as sort of on the affirmation previously. It's a similar thing here, that you're going to affirm that all the information you've provided is accurate and complete, and you've given honest answers to everything. So you would then go to the next on this particular slide, and then so it's now saying everything's complete on the associate side. Now submit it. You click on submit, and it now sends it back to the broker. So goes to the broker. The broker gets a message that this has happened. It's come to them. The broker opens their account again under their My Brokerage and applications, and it would show that this new registration is sitting there waiting for the broker's approval. The broker would hit complete. When they hit complete, it will bring them to the next step in the process. So they would see the personal information for that associate here. If they're satisfied that that's all complete, and the broker would go to the next step. The broker would then review the answers to the questions for suitability that have been provided. So if they're all no's, then it's straightforward. There's no issues. But if there's a yes, then that requires review by RECA staff if any of these are answered yes. But the broker would review this, and if they have any questions about anything, so if there was yeses on any of this, they could speak to the associate to get more information as to why they've answered that yes to that question, so that the broker can be assured whether or not they're satisfied with the answers and they still want to go ahead and license this person with their brokerage. So they would, if they are going to go ahead, if they go to the next step, where they have a choice. Do you accept this application? In most cases, it's going to be yes. And they would say yes and accept it. And then, excuse me, they have an acknowledgement as well that they've reviewed it. They've discussed this issue with the applicant, and they've looked at all the information and they're fine with it. So they would then again go on to the next step if they're fine. So the only thing left to do is payment. So individuals can pay for their licensing application, or the brokerage can pay. So that's a discussion that has to happen at each and every brokerage as to who's going to be paying any fees that are necessary at this point. So people who are currently licensed with RECA and only do condominium management and will be changing their license over from a real estate license to a condominium management license will not be having to pay a fee. But people who have current license with RECA and are going to maintain their real estate license and get a condominium management license, they will have to pay the fee for a condominium manager. Likewise, people who are brand new to RECA in a regulated industry will also have to pay the licensing fees. So on this particular drop down on this slide under the broker's account, the broker can select the brokerage will pay it or the individual will pay it. If the brokerage is paying it, and let's say the brokerage has 5 or 6 different condo managers, what they can do is they can actually say the brokerage will pay this and hit complete, and then everything's done from the associate's perspective. But you'll see later on another slide where the brokerage can actually make a bulk payment. So here, so the brokerage, rather than doing 5 separate transactions for each of the condo managers that I said if a brokerage had 5 managers, they can actually approve the applications of the 5 managers. And once all 5 are approved, they can submit a payment for all 5 of them in one payment. And then as soon as that payment is processed through the MyRECA, then that condition is taken off the license, and then the licensing of those people is complete. So once that's done, once the application information is all complete, it's been accepted by the broker, and the payment is made, then the broker is able to look in their account and see the individual. So again, they would look in the My Broker tab, My People, and the new person that they've just hired would show as one of the entries under the people licensed with that brokerage. So the associate can also check. So after the broker has gone through this process, they should always go, as I said, to this screen and double check to make sure that that associate is now duly licensed with their brokerage and can provide condominium management services. As well, we recommend that associates, before they start, when they're they're getting a new license, before they actually start providing condominium management services, they should go to their MyRECA account under licensing and under current licenses and check to make sure it says condominium management, their license status is authorized as an associate. Just in case there was any problems or issues, you want to make sure, because if this doesn't show as authorized, then you need to inquire as to why it's not authorized. And we need to fix whatever the issue or the problem is. So you should never start providing services until you've checked to make sure that you're properly authorized. Now, I mentioned the criminal record check several times, and there's a lot of misunderstandings and problems that happen around, unfortunately, around certified criminal record checks. You do not go to your local police department, municipal police department, to get this done. This is done through the RCMP National Criminal Record Database. So you have to get it done through an office or a location that's specifically geared to do the RCMP criminal record checks. So if you go to the RECA website, and it's under, if you just look under the licensing tab, you'll find the information specifically on this, and it'll tell you what locations there are, where they are throughout Alberta to get this done. So as I said before, anybody that's been unlicensed for over a year, or if you're a brand new applicant, you need to have a criminal record check done. It must be the fingerprint-based check. And you have to include your full legal name and your birth date. And when I say your full legal name, if let's say you happen to have 3 middle names. So you have to submit your full name, your first name, your 3 middle names, and your last name as part of this. If you do not submit your full legal name, then this criminal record check will not be considered valid. It's very important because people find it hard to believe that we will get results back sometimes if there's multiple people with the same name. The report we get back from the RCMP says they weren't able to validate that this specific person because they've identified, X number of people with the same name. So you have to make sure that the birth date, the full legal name, and your fingerprints are submitted. And once that's done, it goes to the RCMP office in Ottawa that deals with this. You need to request that they mail the criminal record check to RECA. So you provide them with our address. If you make a mistake, if the criminal record check for some reason comes to your own personal address, and you see an envelope from the RCMP, do not open the envelope. Deliver the envelope to RECA unopened. If the envelope has been opened, the criminal record check will not be considered valid. So you cannot open the envelope, and that's why we ask that you have them send it directly to us so that that doesn't become an issue. And so the locations, as I said, are on the RCMP website, or you can go to the RECA website and we have the same information there. Very important you do this and they get the ball rolling soon. It can take a couple of months for this to go through. So I mentioned that some people that were licensed prior to January 1st of 2014 must provide some other information, and that's because prior to that date, RECA was not being as strict about the ID information as we are now. And so if we don't have certain information on file for you, then you're going to have to upload that information. So it's pretty straightforward though. A government issued photo ID, your proof of ability to work in Canada, which could be any number of documents. And if you've changed your name, you also have to provide that documentation. So a name change can be for different reasons. You may not have liked your name or part of your name, and you went through the legal process to change your name. You may have gotten married and changed your name and taken the name of your partner, or you've gone with a hyphenated name, or you've dropped parts of your name. You may have, if you were one of those people with 3 middle names, you may have decided to drop 2 or 3 of them. from your current IDs. So just because you have a driver's license, that does not say what your legal name is necessarily. So if you've changed your name, RECA will be asking for the documentation to prove that it's been done legitimately. So the last section on the licensing process is the opening of a brokerage. So this applies particularly to brokers and associate brokers involved with the management of a company. So it's a fairly straightforward process. It has to be completed by the broker, and as I said, the brokerage cannot start licensing people until the broker and the brokerage are licensed with RECA. So the first step is the broker. It could be an associate broker who's currently licensed with us, who's going to be opening and being the broker of a condominium management brokerage. So if you're a broker or an associate broker, this button shows up on your screen under current licenses. So you'd click on the ability apply to open a brokerage, and then that will take you through the step-by-step process. Again, read the instructions, provide the information. So it's just basically fill in the blanks. Then you have to declare what your ownership position is on the brokerage, and what type of ownership of the brokerage will be, sole proprietorship or a corporation, whatever it might be. Do the drop down and select the appropriate category. The reason we asked for the previous question there about the ownership of the brokerage, if the broker is not the majority owner of the brokerage, then there's additional information which I'll come to in a minute. So you have to declare, is the brokerage a franchise? Because if it is a franchise, you'll be required to upload franchise documents proving that you have the legal right to use the franchise name in your brokerage name. And also, does your brokerage name or trade name contain a domain name? And that's something relatively new in the last probably 5 to 10 years, where we're seeing domain names built into names of companies. And again, if you're selecting yes in that instance, you'd have to provide a copy of the document proving that you have ownership of that trade name in order to use it as part of your brokerage name. So you'd complete the information here that it's asking for, and again, type of brokerage wouldn't show up in the case of at the bottom in the case of a condominium management brokerage, because that's a real estate issue. So it doesn't play a part in condominium management. But on the upper part here, you can see there's the formal name of the company that owns the brokerage, and if the name being used to operate as a brokerage is different from the company name, then you have to have an approved operating name, doing business as, whatever that might be. So we have many numbered companies in Alberta that own brokerages, but they don't advertise their numbered company name. They do doing business as. So it's important that you fill out that information and that you have the proper documentation, again, to prove that you have approval for the doing business as registered. So you'd complete this section with what your registered business address is. This is the bricks and mortar location of your business. So RECA doesn't particularly care where in Alberta your office location is, but you have to have one. It can be in an office complex, it can be in a retail situation, it can be standalone, it can be in your home, if your municipality allows you to run a business out of your home. So complete that information. You can provide your mailing address as a separate thing. That can be a separate address from your bricks and mortars location. So again, fill it out, your mailing address, if it's if you have a separate mailing address, and also the brokerage application includes the location of your financial records. So what institution are you using for trust accounts? This page again now is asking again about the information is all accurate and true and complete. And also coming back, asking you if if anybody that's in the ownership of that particular corporation or company has had any kind of regulatory body, any kind of jurisdiction other than RECA refuse them a license. So RECA, and you might find that odd why RECA would ask for that. It's because people that I mentioned previously that may have no longer eligible for a license through RECA because they've gone out through a Section 54. They cannot be involved in the ownership of a brokerage either, because it wouldn't make sense that if somebody has sort of been taken out of the industry for inappropriate behavior, then to have them in the background pulling the strings for the operation of a brokerage. So the reason we ask for the information as to who they are and ask for this declaration is so that we don't end up in that situation, having somebody that's not appropriate to be in the ownership. The broker would complete this information here, the final acknowledgements, and then that will take them to the final affirmation. And then there would be the credit card information for payment for the brokerage fee. And then you would hit complete. You must hit complete to submit the application for review. Now, once you've hit complete, again, you can look in your system and it will show you that your application is now in the system. It'll say condominium management. It'll new brokerage application. RECA is waiting for details. The details need to come from the applicant. And now you would hit complete here to provide the balance of the information necessary for the application. So once you hit complete there, it will bring you to a screen that lists all the different documents that could be required, depending on what ownership structure your company has, whether or not you're a franchise, the domain name. So there's some things you wouldn't upload if they don't apply, but all the ones that apply, you would upload through here. And then once you've uploaded everything, it would take it to the next step. So in this case, it would be due brokerage application review. It says it's approved. So in this case, the fees weren't paid. The licensing fee for the brokerage wasn't paid. So the brokerage is not active yet because we're waiting for payment. So you would click on payment and you would go to the payment screen and pay for the brokerage application. And then once you do that, you'd get a message saying that your brokerage is authorized. And then again, if you look in your MyRECA under My Brokerage and License, it would say license status authorized, and it would say industry condominium management. So that's it for the RECA Online system. A couple of last pieces. The fees were approved by the council or the board at the end of July, and this information has been posted to the RECA account. Or website. You'll find the RECA website quite good at finding relevant information. In this case, if you were to type licensing fees into the search function on the website's homepage, it will produce a list of what it's found. And right at the moment, the top thing that will come out of that list, if you put in licensing fees, is this schedule, which is more information than what I have here. RECA has made an effort to streamline the licensing process from the start of the regulation of condominium management industries. This includes waiving the eligibility administration fee for applicants already licensed by RECA, waiving the application review fee for all condominium management brokerages, and waiving the requirement for unlicensed condominium managers to provide proof of education and English proficiency. So once the initial licensing of the existing condo management industry is complete, new brokerages and licensee applicants will have to meet and pay the regular requirements. So the things that have been waived in order to move the current condominium management industry from an unlicensed industry to a regulated industry, certain things have been waived or removed to make that process simpler and easier in order to get everybody into a regulated system. So now that we've gotten through all of that, I'm going to open the floor for questions. But before I do that, I'll just note here for you that the information about Condo Manager licensing is under a button on the home page of the RECA website. So just click on that Condo Manager licensing eligibility. That will take you to a page that has all the information around eligibility. And then if you also on that page, there's links to other pages if you want more details. For instance, if you wanted to see the proposed rules that have been sent on to government for approval, you'll find those there, and you'll find a fairly detailed list of frequently asked questions on there as well. And then if there's any direct questions, people can email me or phone me directly. I strongly advise you that when you're looking for information, either go to the RECA website or contact RECA, and don't listen to the rumor mill. We hear lots and lots of misinformation out there that I don't know where it gets started or who starts it, but we see a lot of different information being spread around that's erroneous. So if you're confused or you have a question or need more clarification, feel free to contact me directly, and I'd be more than happy to help you out and keep the process moving smoother for you. So that's it for my part, and now I'm happy to take questions. And Charles Stevenson is online with us, and he's been monitoring the chat, or not the chat, but the questions and answers, and he's going to bring those up, and we will go through them.
Well, thanks, Doug. Great presentation. Thanks for that. We're kind of short on time with half an hour left, and I've got 33 open questions for you. So probably the best question number one, isn't in that list of 33. That's going to be, what are we going to do when we run out of time? Will you reach out to the questions individually?
I'm more than happy that if somebody has a question and wants to contact me afterwards to do that, yes.
Great. So we're going all the way back to 115, and Jeremy asks, can you clarify the broker piece? Can a corporation have multiple brokers? Are businesses with multiple licenses required to have multiple brokers?
So condominium management is being set up as a industry all on its own, separate from real estate. So there has to be two different brokerages, but if you have somebody that's qualified, they can be the broker for both brokerages. Or if the person who has the real estate brokerage license, broker license, is not qualified for condominium management, you would hire a separate person as broker for your condominium management brokerage. Or if in some cases there are brokers out there that are qualified to do both, but they've decided at this point where they're separating out their operations that the broker is only going to stay with one side of the operations, and they're promoting somebody within their brokerage who's an associate broker to be the broker for the other side.
So what I'm hearing you say is that effective December 1st, when RECA regulates 3 different industries, mortgage brokerage, real estate, and condo management, that the same corporation could hold all 3 licenses. The same individual could be the broker for all 3, assuming they qualify, and all 3 could be run out of the same office. They just need to hold 3 licenses.
Correct.
Thank you. Victoria asks, I'm going to try and move through these quickly, Doug, so that our audience benefits from the responses. Number of people asked, will this slide deck be made available before I come back to Victoria's question?
I don't think there's anything that would stop us from posting it on the website as a link.
I agree. We would put that up on the condo frequently asked questions section or something somewhere close to there.
Yes. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. So Victoria asks, how about self-managed boards, and what about a board that hires someone to be the condo manager?
Well, she's entered into an area that we still don't have all the answers. As it stands right now, there's an exemption in the Real Estate Act, the amendments that were made last year, that specifically says that a self-managed condominium corporation, the directors and officers of that corporation will not require a license. So if it's a board of directors managing their own condominium complex, then they clearly do not have to be licensed. What we're not clear on at this point is if they hire, for instance, a staff person that works for the condo corporation and helps the board carry out the services in managing that corporation, whether or not that person would be exempt. We're waiting for the provincial government to approve what's called an exemption regulation, and the exemption regulation will state specifically who is excluded from requiring a condominium management license, in addition to what I described as in the Act. So if they choose to exempt, for instance, a person hired by a board that is an employee of the board, then that would fall under the exemption regulation and they wouldn't require a license. But I have to caution people at this point that we don't know what the exemption regulation will say until it's been approved by government. And we're hoping that we will, by October, see the exemption regulation so that we'll know exactly who is exempt and who is not.
Great, thanks, Doug. Moving on, Lisa asks, if you're an associate at a brokerage and currently do some leasing activities, and you're also doing condo management activities, will you have to have both associate licenses?
Yes, Lisa, you will. So because leasing is typically falls under property management, you would, if you're going to continue doing that, you would have to have your real estate license as an associate, and then you would have to apply for a condominium manager associate license to work for the condo brokerage side of the operation as well.
Okay, Wanda wants to know, this is a great question, will there be a practice exam available online prior to actually challenging the real exam?
We've never discussed a practice exam, so I'm not, and I don't think RECA has ever had such a thing. We've had, as part of the courses, there's been lots of review questions that would mimic what types of questions you would get on the exams, but we haven't had a separate practice exam. But I can certainly pass that question and that comment on to our education department, the director of education, and see what he thinks.
Perfect. Gibson asks, will a condominium administrator require a license or just the condominium managers?
So if an administrator is not carrying out a function in the under the definition of providing condominium management services, then there's no requirement for them to be licensed. So if they're providing support activities like bookkeeping, record keeping, that sort of thing, then an assistant to a condominium manager can be unlicensed, as long as they're not doing activities that we consider to be licensed activities under the definition.
Lisa, it appears that you've asked a very similar question, so I'm going to consider that answered. And if we haven't answered it adequately, please reach out to either Doug or myself after we're done. Doug, Carrie again asks about what materials will be provided prior to challenging the exam, and I'm guessing you're going to need to get back to Carrie as well.
Yeah, well, we don't know when the courses will be available by the third-party course developers, and we also don't know what the course providers' policies will be. So RECA, with the courses that RECA has put on over the years, has always made the materials for the courses available. You could purchase course materials separate from having to actually register and do the course in its entirety. So for instance, if you are licensed and you've just want to see what the property management course is all about, and you're not sure if you're going to take it or not, you could actually buy the course materials for the property management course separately from registering for the course. We don't know if any of the third-party course providers will be willing to sell their materials prior to somebody actually registering and taking the course. So until we know who the course providers are and what their policies are, we really can't answer that question.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Carrie asks, if a current broker has already taken a property management course through RECA, do they still have to challenge the exam?
The answer would be yes. Property management is considered very different from condominium management. And having a property management license does not give you any credit towards the requirement to prove that you are knowledgeable under condominium management. So you would still have to do the exam for the condominium management practices, and if not successful, do the course.
Great. Victoria asks, for the 2 years experience, how much of a gap will be allowed? If wanting a broker license for a small company, what if only 3 condo boards have been managed in the last 10 years or 5 years? How can someone get licensed?
So as long as they have, as an individual, they have 2 or more years hands-on frontline condo manager experience with condominium boards, that wouldn't matter that it's scattered amongst a number of different condo corporations. And the same thing for the management of a company. As long as you've had 2 or more years experience managing them, we will look at your history that you provide. So don't be shy about just simply providing the history in your affirmation. And if we feel there's anything that's questionable or isn't clear, then we will contact you and go through it with you just to ensure what it is that you're trying to tell us.
Perfect. Thanks, Doug. So this is a 2-part question from Wessam. I believe we've just answered the first part. For not currently licensed condo associates, what is the required experience before applying? And then supplementary, will doing the courses void the experience requirement?
The answer is no. The process that we've set up for getting people licensed effective December 1st is to move everybody that has experience, 2 or more years experience in condominium management, from an unregulated industry to a regulated industry. There had to be a line drawn at a certain level, and the decision by the advisory committee and the council was that 2 years experience was what was considered appropriate. And so you need that 2 years experience. People with less than 2 years experience will have to complete the appropriate courses if they've never done them. So if somebody, for instance, has less than 2 years experience and they've done the fundamentals course, the current fundamentals course, they will get credit for the fundamentals course, but they will still have to do the condominium management practices course once it's available. The same as a new hire would starting out from scratch.
So in essence, though, once they complete that practice course, whether they've been active for a day, a week, a month, even a year, they would become licensed right away. So I think if I'm understanding Wassam's question, the answer is yes, it would void the experience requirement if they completed the courses accordingly.
Yes, yep.
Perfect, thank you. I'm moving on to Kiara asks an interesting question. What is the process if a brokerage finds a board is acting unethically rather than the other way around? Will RECA still review the case in the same way?
Well, we would look at the actions of the condominium management brokerage and the associate involved with that particular corporation. And clearly, if the issues and problems are with the governance of the corporation and they're doing things outside of the law, whether it be in breach of common law or in breach of the Condominium Property Act, we certainly wouldn't hold the management company responsible. What we would expect the management company and its representatives to do is to point out what is being done inappropriate, and not just in conversation. We would expect, because this would be a serious issue, that they put those concerns in writing to the board, and it would likely end up in a situation that if they're insisting that the condo manager do things that are, for instance, that are against the requirements under the Condominium Property Act, then the brokerage would have to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to continue to provide services to that condominium corporation. Because if it's impossible for them to do their job without being in violation of the law, then that's not a good thing. So the brokerage should withdraw their services until the board decides to do things properly.
Thanks, Doug. Teresa asks, what policies will be in place to protect broker managers when boards or owners who complain about issues that the manager does not have control over?
Again, RECA would look, in that type of a complaint, RECA would look at whatever the grounds for the complaint are, but one of the key documents is going to be the service agreement that is in place between the brokerage and the condominium corporation. And if whatever's at question, you know, the manager's being accused of not doing, if it's not something that has been explicitly required under the service agreement, then they can't be held at fault for that. So I found this in yesterday's presentation as well. I think there are some people that are concerned where this has been an unregulated industry, and that, you know, RECA is going to come in and you know, we're going to be the big bad regulator that's just going to chase after everybody. That's not the case. We give everybody the benefit of the doubt that if they're properly licensed, that they're carrying out their business in a professional way. When complaints come to us, we don't make a decision or take a view before we've got all the facts. And then we look at it in terms of, is the complaint just, you know, a silly complaint, or is it something that has grounds? Does it fall within the Real Estate Act and the rules that we have authority to deal with the complaint? And again, we'd look back at the service agreement as such a vital document. We would look at that and say, you know, is the brokerage doing its work according to what was required under the service agreement? And if they are, then again, that's in the brokerage's favor. One of the things I pointed out when we talked about similar thing yesterday was that RECA gets a lot of complaints currently in, you know, for the real estate industry, but a very large percentage of those complaints are dismissed up front for either lack of our authority in that area, lack of information, or whatever the issue is not a breach of the rules or the act. So a large number of them get dismissed for those types of reasons. And then when we actually do investigate a complaint, the ones that do move further down the pipe, many of those get to a certain point that we end the investigation and anything resulting from it, because we've now discovered by getting more information that there may not actually be an issue from a RECA standpoint. So we don't just listen and, you know, and run with a complaint quickly. We look at the merits of the complaint and have to figure out how it fits into the process. And we will politely tell complainants in many cases that their complaint is not going to go any further because it doesn't fall within our jurisdiction, or there's not enough. We get people that make complaints that then refuse to cooperate and provide information. So that will typically end the investigation in that kind of a matter as well. So we're not out, RECA is not out to get people. We're out just simply want to make sure that people follow the requirements under the Act and the rules, and that they're following what's required under their service agreements that they've negotiated with the condo corporations that they work with. And most of the time, what RECA does is more on an educational and helping people improve the professionalism of the industry, rather than simply trying to deal with it through a complaint process.
Thanks, Doug. Russell asks, what are our options if the condo can't get fidelity bond or insurance against fraudulent acts? We have some that have been denied due to previous management companies losing paperwork.
Oh, that's a legal issue really, I think, unless you have a different input, Charles, but I mean, the corporation is in violation of the Condominium Property Act by not having that insurance in place. And they put all their unit owners in jeopardy by not having that insurance in place. From our perspective, a brokerage should not be providing condominium management services to a corporation that does not have adequate insurance in place. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Charles.
I don't know that I have anything to add, Doug. I think that hits the nail on the head, is that the Condominium Property Act is the legislation that requires that insurance. So they're probably in line for a discussion with our colleagues at Service Alberta.
And I would recommend the brokerage at that point when they get into that position. For instance, if a condo corporation is coming to them wanting them to manage them, and you discover that they don't have the adequate insurance in place, that you put it in writing to them that you cannot provide management services to their corporation unless their corporation has adequate insurance in place. And that way it's black and white. You put it in writing. You've done what you can do at that stage of the game. It's then up to the board to move forward in figuring out their insurance problem.
So Victoria asks, if we have a prior MyRECA account, should we create a new one?
No, your current MyRECA account can deal with being licensed in multiple industries. So you would just go through the processes I described in order to activate, to do the eligibility, or to apply for a license in October or November. You don't need a different MyRECA account.
Sandra wants to know, how much is the MyRECA account application fee?
There is no charge to set up a MyRECA account. You just simply start the process, provide the information it requires, and it sets it up for you.
Mohammed asked about the cost of the license. I think you answered that in the presentation, but then there's a supplementary that says how long to apply for and be approved for the license.
So the license applications, as I mentioned, opens October the 12th. Anybody that is providing condominium management services currently and continuing past December 1st will be required to be licensed by December 1st. And when they pay for their license, that license will run from December 1st until September 30th of 2022. So it'll be for the 10-month period. Then condominium managers will be part of the regular renewal process that RECA does in August and September for having new licenses issued effective October the 1st. And then your new license in October 22 will run from October 1st of 2022 to September 30th of 23.
Thanks, Doug. Another interesting question. If you have volunteered as the president of a condo board for more than 2 years, will that meet the experience requirement?
It will not. It's good experience. You see it from the other side, but it's not the same as being a condo manager providing advice and recommendations and services to a condominium corporation.
Lisa wants to know, do you require the condominium common name or the CCN on the affirmation form?
Either would suffice, as long as we can identify what corporation it is and you provided a contact information for somebody at that corporation.
Sandy wants to know, how much is the course and how much is the license fee? I know you've answered the second part.
The courses, if you look on the RECA website, you'll see on that same fee schedule that I pointed out, you'll see the fees for the courses that RECA is currently offering, but there are no courses there for condominium management. Until we know who the actual third-party providers are that come forward with an approved course, we don't know either who they are or what their fee will be. And we also don't know what style courses they will be developing because there's three possibilities. It could be completely online, similar to the current RECA courses. It could be a hybrid, online and some classroom, or it could be totally classroom, although I doubt that we'll see much coming out as totally classroom, because the cost of and time involved of doing totally classroom classes for this probably make it cost prohibitive to offer that option, but we won't know until the course providers come out with what they're going to offer.
Kiara wants to know, can a brokerage cover the education eligibility application fee as well?
Yes, if the brokerage is going to input its information to pay the fee, if you've got the broker or somebody there with you when you're filling this out, or you can pay it and then the brokerage reimburses you, whichever route it goes.
Can we start the process of setting up a new or second brokerage now, or do we have to wait until October 12th? So that's a combination question from Linda and Wanda.
So actual applications for licensing doesn't open until October the 12th. I would recommend anybody that's going to be involved in setting up a new brokerage, go to the RECA website, go through the tutorials and all the information about starting a new brokerage, and gathering up whatever documentation they know they're going to require once they go forward with the application. So they can get for instance, the disclosure form. If the broker owns does not have a majority interest in the brokerage, then there's a form that has to be filled out and signed by a principal of the company. There's the documents for franchise or any other incorporation, etc. All those documents, you can do the work in advance, gather up all that information, so that once October 12th comes, anytime after that, you can simply start the process online and you would have the documents ready to simply upload when you come to that portion of the application. So you can't actually go through the process or start the process with RECA until October the 12th.
Thanks, Doug. Wissam asks, if you are an associate under a brokerage, I think this is clarification, do you need to get a separate license, or is it under the brokerage license umbrella?
All licenses for individuals are under the brokerage license umbrella. So you'll in condominium management, there will be the condominium management brokerage, and then any associate brokers and associates that work for that brokerage will be licensed under that brokerage.
Marie wants to know what responsibility does an associate have if the board of a condo complex does not enforce certain bylaws?
The manager would have an obligation to have that a very serious discussion with that board and the consequences of enforcing or not enforcing bylaws and the problems it creates when they pick and choose what they will or will not enforce, or who they will or will not enforce things with. It can cause serious legal issues for a corporation. So they need to have that serious heart-to-heart about that. And if, again, the brokerage has to look at it from their perspective as well. And if a condo board is going to dig in their heels and not do what they're required under the Condominium Property Act and its regulations, which is to enforce the bylaws evenly across the board and to enforce all of them, not just pick and choose which ones they are going to enforce. The brokerage has to make a decision if they're going to continue representing that condominium corporation, or if they're going to say, because you're doing this and you're not taking our advice, we can't represent you anymore.
Jeremy asks a really good question. Will having an interim license allow reciprocity into BC and Ontario, the other two provinces that license condominium managers? Will our conditional or interim license allow that reciprocity?
That would be a question for BC or Ontario, but my guess would be if they saw you had a license with conditions on it, that they would want to know what those conditions are. And if the conditions were something that was paramount to you being fully qualified with that license, I would suggest they probably wouldn't entertain giving you the equivalency until you have completed that requirement. Do you have a feeling on that, Charles?
Oh, I think I agree completely, Doug, that would be a question for BC and Ontario. And yes, I believe your speculation is correct, but more importantly, if people want the answer to that question, they should reach out to the jurisdiction where they're going. We have the, I guess we have the luxury of looking for people coming from BC and Ontario where they're only licensed if they're licensed, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
If we own the condos, do we need to be licensed?
I need more information. If they own all the condos in a building?
I don't have a qualifier for that, Doug. If we own the condos, Karina is asking if we own the condos, do we need to be licensed? So Karina, maybe you'd reach out to Doug or myself afterwards. We need more information to answer that question, please.
The only thing I was thinking that if it was along the lines of if you own a condo in a complex, do you need a license to manage manage that complex? And there is a proposed exemption for that situation where a associate could in fact manage a corporation that they own a condo unit in, but they can't do it for any remuneration at all or any benefit. And they could do that if they happen to own condos in 2 different complexes. They could manage up to 2 different complexes under that scenario. But again, they're not allowed to make any remuneration or get any benefits for doing that. But we still don't know where the government stands on that, if they'll approve that proposed exemption or not.
Thanks, Doug. Matthew asks, our condo manager is licensed in property management. Do I renew his RECA license for September 30th and then have to pay his condo license fee on top of that when he gets licensed for condo management?
So the answer would be it depends. If he has a property management license and all he's doing for your brokerage is condominium management, and you're going to move him over into the condominium management brokerage, and he doesn't do any other real estate trading, then I would suggest he's only going to have the 1 license. So you could redo him at the end of September as a property manager and then transition his license up or by December 1st to being a condominium manager. He'd drop his property management license and get a condominium management license, and there'd be no charge for that. But if he's going to do both, if he's still going to continue to have a property management license and provide either property management or other real estate services and do condominium management, then he would have to keep his property management license and qualify for and pay for a condominium manager license.
Doug, Donna asks, by the way, we're at 2:59 here. I don't know if you have another commitment. I don't. And we still have 100+ people on board. Shall we answer questions until we drive everyone out?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right, let's continue. So Donna asks, what if you manage only the retail portion of a mixed-use condo? Would license still be required for the brokerage or associate?
If you're managing a condo corporation, regardless of how much or how little or what type, you require a license.
So can I add a caveat to that, Doug?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is managing the retail portion of a mixed-use condo, and they're managing the relationship between landlords and tenants, as opposed to managing the affairs of the condo corporation, then that requires a property management license.
Yes, I just assumed they were talking condo management, but if they are doing property management in addition to the condominium management, then they'd have to have both licenses.
Perfect. Thank you.
Or if they've been hired to do leasing, property management of retail portion, for instance, of a complex, but they're not providing management services to the condominium corporation, then they could just be a property manager licensed under real estate, and somebody else would be and it would be a different brokerage that would be the condo management brokerage.
Okay, fair enough. We're still getting more questions coming in, but we're down to 10 now, Doug. So I think I'm seeing the finish line here. If one has seen the management of the condominium division, presumably of an existing brokerage, but is not actually managing condominiums, how does this impact the process?
So again, we would be looking at that person if they were wanting to continue as managing the brokerage at some level, whether it's as the broker or as an assistant manager, so to speak. They would have to have some frontline condominium management experience. So that's the base requirement, is 2+ years of condominium management experience, in addition to their experience as a company manager.
Thanks, Doug. Lorelei asks, annual audits, and my apologies if I am mispronouncing names. I'm doing my very best here, folks. Lorelei asks, annual audits required under RECA are a substantial cost for the brokerage. She says theirs is around 10 grand. Will RECA require a separate audit for the trust accounts, condo versus property management, or will it remain the same?
So I wouldn't think that the cost will change for a brokerage, because if they're doing mixed services now and they get an audit done of all their trust accounts and then they split it, the overall cost should be similar, because it's just they move some of those trust accounts from being under the real estate brokerage to being under the condominium management brokerage. So I don't know if I'm misunderstanding the question, but if they're in order to be holding funds for a condominium corporation, they would currently require a license as a property manager. The requirement for licensing of condominium management brokerages won't change that for them. They still have the same obligations. There'll be no obligation, for instance, for the condominium management brokerage to have accounts that are held in the name of the condominium corporation, not in trust by the brokerage. Those won't be audited, require an audit, just the accounts held by the brokerage.
Alex asks, will brokerage accounting staff doing collections or disbursements require licensing?
Well, the bookkeeping staff, I mean, the normal inflow of contributions from unit owners, they're just collected by the brokerage. And goes into whatever accounts, whether it's trust accounts or goes directly into the corporation's accounts. Just from a bookkeeping point of view and keeping track of all of that, they would not have to be licensed. However, if there were going to be letters sent out to unit owners that are in arrears, the bookkeeper couldn't do that. The bookkeeper can prepare the letters, but they'd have to go out under the signature of the condominium manager.
Great. Stella asks, I am ready to do my property management exam and I am already working as a real estate agent. My question is, should I wait 2 years before I qualify to take the condominium management courses, as I don't have any experience?
Well, that would really depend if she wants to actually start trying to get experience. So if she did want to try to get experience, then she'd have to get her associate's license and get employed by a brokerage that does condominium management in order to move along. So that's the only way she's going to get experience moving forward under a licensed and regulated system, is that she would have to get herself licensed with a brokerage first and get that experience. And what she does with it down the road is up to her.
So perhaps the question that's being asked, Doug, and again, I can only read what I see on the screen, but maybe the question that's being asked is, if I wait 2 years, can I get a conditional license then? And the answer is after December 1st, no.
Correct.
That applies for this. That applies only for this influx of previously unlicensed and unregulated industry.
Yes.
We don't know who the third-party course providers are yet. I think you've mentioned that already, Doug. Are we required? This is Lynn, to open a separate trust account, or can condo fees currently in a pooled trust account stay as they are?
So I'm assuming it's a pooled trust account for condo corporation funds. The rules under the proposed rules for condominium management that RECA has developed, and again, we're waiting for final approval from government, but those proposed rules are very explicit that you cannot commingle funds. So it's not like property management where you can set up a trust account and put a dozen different properties through that same trust account as a pooled trust account. In condominium management, that's not possible because the Condominium Property Act explicitly forbids commingling of funds belonging to different corporations and commingling of reserve funds with operating funds. So they have to be kept separate. The only place that we had a pooled situation in our rules at RECA for condominium management was EFT account, so an electronic transfer account. So in the proposed rules, it allows for a pooled account that you can run all your EFT collections for the contributions from numerous condo corporations through that same account, and then they're dispersed from that account to the appropriate accounts for the different condo corporations or trust accounts. So, but as far as accounts for holding funds in, because the EFT account, you don't hold funds there, it's just a transfer account. So there is no situation where pooled condominium corporation funds is allowed.
2 more questions, Doug, unless some more come in, but Noor asks, I missed the answer you probably gave. What is essentially the difference between property management and condo management when someone is already RECA is already licensed in property management?
So this goes back really 6 years as to why it's come this way. When it was discussions were happening between government and RECA initially, and what the structure would look like. And then RECA did consultations with industry and has had many consultations and discussions with stakeholders and got a lot of feedback from unit owners, boards, and condo managers. And the overall consensus by the vast majority of people is that condominium management is very different from property management. Property management, you're dealing typically with a landlord and a property, whether it's a single family home, whether it's a condo in a condo complex that somebody's bought as an investment and is renting, or you're managing an apartment building for a landlord that owns a 10-unit or 50-unit apartment building. But your client is one person, and your whole focus is typically on leasing and maintenance of the property. Whereas condominium management is much difficult too, but it's much different in that your client is a board of directors, and the board of directors is responsible for the operations of the condominium corporation, and the condominium manager is providing advice and services to a board of directors in managing a corporation. So you're not managing any specific units or individuals. It's a corporation, a board of directors, and the type of things you're doing are quite different. I mean, some of the asset management things are the same. So whether you're a property manager or a condominium manager and you're hiring the company to do the snow clearance or mow the lawns or paint the hallways, that part of it is the same. And that's what people often look at, is that, well, those types of things are the same for both. But the more serious end of the business for condominium management is the condo managers meeting with condo boards and providing assistance to them, everything from dealing with governance issues and legal issues and management issues of the complex to complaints and problems in dealing with various units or common property. So there's quite a few differences between the two, and that's why condominium management has been set up as a separate industry and separate licensing.
We got a little assist here from Victoria, Doug. She focuses right in, says governance experience is the difference. I know you just mentioned that, but thanks for that, Victoria. Final question, Doug. I'm going to sign off right now, let you answer the final question, and then wrap it up. This final question is from Lillian. What if your condo manager is registered as a broker, presumably as a real estate broker, with RECA? Are they under the same license and still licensed as a condo manager?
So if your broker is licensed in real estate, but they have experience that meets the requirements in condo management, then they can do both. They can be the broker for the real estate brokerage, and they can be the broker also for the condominium management brokerage. So they can wear two hats, but they can operate both businesses out of the same location. They can have the same support staff, receptionists, bookkeeper, administrators. And the same company can own both. But yes, a broker can wear two hats, one for the real estate brokerage and one for the condominium management brokerage. And I see that is the last of the questions, as Charles mentioned. And again, I remind you that should you have any questions or need further clarification or want to discuss anything, by all means, feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to discuss it with you. So thanks very much for your time, and have a good afternoon.